Pharisees and Sadducees came, and to test Jesus, they asked him to show them a sign from heaven. He answered them, "When it is evening, you say, 'It will be fair weather, for the sky is red.' And in the morning, 'It will be stormy today, for the sky is red and threatening.' You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. An evil and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah." Then he left them and went away.
Not for the first time, Jesus is being tested. We've seen it from the Pharisees on more than a few occasions, and now the Sadducees are getting in on the act as well. Way back in our exploration of Matthew, we explore the differences between these two groups of religious leaders. So we're not going to get into that here. Instead, let's think about what's going on. Other than in the first 12 verses of chapter 16 of Matthew's Gospel, the bringing together of these two groups only occurs in one other place in the whole of the New Testament, and that's in Matthew 3, verse 7. When John the Baptist refers to the Pharisees and the Sadducees as a brood of vipers. A brood of vipers. Let's be honest, that's not a label you forget easily. Matthew's inclusion of them here is a clear indication to us that events are beginning to take a much darker turn. As our focus begins to shift towards Jerusalem, we'll discover in these next few chapters that Jesus' future looks, well, as stormy as a red sky in the morning. And the Sadducees are going to play a key role in what happens next. But we're also seeing that Matthew and the rest of Jesus' followers are becoming increasingly alienated from the people they might previously have considered to be their own community. In fact, the Greek word that Matthew uses to explain that Jesus is being tested here is the same word used during his temptation by the devil in the desert. Make no mistake, this is Matthew placing the devil's opposition to Jesus right alongside the opposition of the Jewish leaders. It's a conflict of kingdoms, a precursor to the later exchange between Jesus and Peter, where we're reminded of the choice that we have between setting one's mind on divine things or on human things. Of course, this is also not the first time that Matthew has recorded the Jewish leaders asking Jesus for a sign. We saw that back in chapter 12. But as we explore this interaction, it's worth noting that there are some very different views on how accurate the first part of Jesus' response is here. So much so that in some translations, you'd see it left out completely. Jesus' answer to the Jewish leaders is that they may know how to interpret the coming weather based on the colour of the sky, but they'll be unable to interpret the only true sign that is actually coming from heaven. He's referring here to his own death and resurrection, which again is placed alongside a reference to Jonah, the prophet of the ancient scriptures, who, yes, was swallowed by a big fish, but perhaps more importantly here was a sign from God himself, someone sent by God to change the lives of those who heard the message. Fast forward to these events, and that sign now isn't Jonah, that sign is Jesus himself, sent by God to change the lives of those who hear and take on board the message. Of course, these Jewish leaders could interpret that, could choose to see that sign, but Jesus knows they'll choose not to. The hardness of their hearts, or maybe just their lack of faith, will make it impossible. All of this points towards what's coming, points towards some teaching that Jesus gives his disciples in the next few verses, and points towards the events that will ultimately take place on a hillside outside of Jerusalem. As we reflect on it, I wonder what Jesus wants to say to us about it, and whether we'll have hearts open to hear it.